Okay, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this session. We're delighted to see such a big crowd. My name's John Watts. I'm the managing partner of a consulting business called MTM. We specialize in media, tech, entertainment, and advertising. We are here today with our partners, Comcast Technology Solutions, to talk about the transformation of broadcasting. So what is this all about? Let me show you. Last year, our friends at Comcast Technology Solutions commissioned us to do a piece of work looking at the state of digital transformation across the TV industry. So our brief was to look at how Europe's major broadcasters are dealing with the challenge of rolling out their digital services. How are they structuring their teams? How are they changing their workflows? What are they doing with their operations? What kind of business model changes are they making? These sorts of things. So it was a qualitative project, but we spent a very happy 12 months roaming far and wide, talking to a very wide range of companies, and have produced an exciting paper, which we will tell you how to get at the end of this session. What we want to do today is to talk about some of the themes and topics that came out of that research, really taking stock of where the market is today. Just to set the scene very briefly, here's a sort of context of what we found. So first of all, no great surprise, streaming services are very widely deployed. Pretty much every major broadcasting organization has at least one, and many have multiple. Most of them are still complementary though, so they are catch-up services. They're supporting linear broadcast channels, typically run by dedicated digital business units, which usually are set off some way to the side. There's not that much operational integration at this point. But one big thing we found is that the industry is about to embark on a process of change. I think what we've done in the last 15 years or so is really lay the foundations for a new, much more disruptive period. We've put in place broadband networks, we've connected them to television sets and other devices. The doors are open for a wide range of new businesses to enter the market. And broadcasters are very aware that they have to change. The big question is how. So during the course of the project, we looked at 6 big areas. We looked at content, how are broadcasters changing their commissioning strategies. We looked at digital products. We looked at the delivery underpinning these products. We looked at the growing art of customer or subscriber management in broadcasters. We looked at sales, and we looked at the technology and operations underpinning all of this. What did we find? You'll have to read the white paper. But to tell you a bit more, we're going to turn to our panel now, just to take stock of where the market is and give us a sense of how things move forward from here. So, this is our exam question for today. Is the TV industry's digital transformation on track? To get the ball rolling, we'll get our panel to introduce themselves. We've cunningly not put them in the right order, just to check that everyone is staying awake. So we'll start with Martin. Where is digital transformation today with the TV industry?
Yes, so my name is Martijn van Orsen. I'm the CEO of 24i, and what we do is we create the front end, the actual applications that you see. So we're the customer face of the applications, and we do that for all the platforms that are out there, mobile, web, and connected TVs. And we work for quite a lot of broadcasters around the world. And what we see is the transformation is really ongoing. And I think what we've seen is when we started, it all started with marketing budgets, and then it started with a little bit of innovation, but now it's getting into the line business. And for us, what we see is we see a lot of data coming into those applications, and I think the next stage will be that people start to understand what you can do with that data and what you can do with that, and how you can have dynamic UIs and stuff like that.
So when you look at the clients you work with, generally how successful have they been in responding to all of the change we've seen over the last 2 decades? Do you think they're mature, they understand what they're doing, it's all in place, or are we still just at the beginning of that process, or somewhere in the middle?
I think there's a lot of underestimation. Right. So what we saw during the Olympics, some of the services that we're developing have struggling with bandwidth, just because a lot of people, it was during working hours, so a lot of people were not using the traditional broadcast, but used the OTT services during their work, and there you see that the anticipation on so much traffic and so much things is totally different. And another example is there's in the Netherlands we have a client, a public broadcaster, and they created a show which was really, really popular, but it wasn't programmed at the right time. So what we saw right after it was aired on live television, we saw a huge uptake in people that wanted to talk about the show the next day, but it was all consumed online. So that's a transformation we really see in the last 1.5 years, but now we start to keep up with that and to identify.
So it's still quite recent in some ways.
Yeah.
Okay. Ronan, do you want to tell us who you are and what you think?
So Ronan Walsh, I'm Senior Project Manager at RT Online and was the delivery lead for the reimagination of RT Player across the last 2 or 3 years. So I think what you were saying earlier, RT's player proposition was very much 7-day catch-up. It was on TV. Here it is over here. It's not everywhere. It's in some places. RT recognized that we needed to be where everyone wanted to consume the content, which meant we need to completely transform our digital delivery or digital processes or operations in-house. And across the last 2 or 3 years, we've had quite an ambitious program of work where we've completely greenfielded our existing RT Player product. We've basically built it up again from scratch. I think a lot of those in the distribution network, we've quadrupled the size of our bandwidth delivery. We've put in a whole new back-end system. Probably 2/3 of the actual delivery project was on our back-end infrastructure systems, which not necessarily everyone sees. Customers see the nice new shiny things delivered by 24i on big screens and by FinCons everywhere else. But we really looked at the back end. How do we build on top of our broadcast workflows? We're not duplicating operations. We're not creating content twice. We're not doing all those inefficient things as a broadcaster. Right. Getting to where the customer expects the content to be.
And when you look at RTE versus, say, your peers across Europe, is your view that RTE is pretty typical in your experience, or do you think you're very different for some reason?
I would say as a public service broadcaster, obviously we look to our colleagues in the UK. BBC and Channel 4 are the mecca of public service player. I would say RT, we've had our player for 9-10 years. It's very well embedded in the market in Ireland, but it was a typical 7-day catch-up service. Right. The new player, I think we've progressed it a lot further. We have non-linear content, non-linear live channels. It's a lot more expanded than what I guess in other markets has
so
now.
So not atypical, probably.
No, we're not typical of a pure catch-up service, and we see that non-linear live, non-linear original content. So we've as part of the new delivery, there's been a whole new content division created within our existing TV and news content teams, who are purely focused on original content for the player through acquisition and production, but purely for non-linear products.
All right, that covers off for going. So Brad, you work with lots of broadcasters. How would you describe the state of digital transformation today?
Thanks, John. So Brad Levine, General Manager of the video platform for international at Comcast Technology Solutions. We do talk with a lot of broadcasters and operators and content holders. So we see quite a broad view of the market. The state of transformation is quite a broad spectrum. I think that there are a number of broadcasters who are very well tuned in to what they need to be doing to keep moving themselves forward, but we're still seeing quite a few players that are behind the curve and that are still trying to search for the way forward. I think that although nobody has the answer, the bolder broadcasters are recognizing that they need to use multiple models, that they need to be testing different options, different content types, different delivery mechanisms, and use those to fine-tune the transformation and strategy as they go.
And briefly, when you think about that variation, how important is scale? I think is something that's going to come up throughout this conversation. Do you need a lot of scale to be able to successfully digitally transform your business, run lots of models? Is that one of the key variations you see?
Yeah, I mean, I think from the broadcaster side, historically, RT would have looked to have built it all in-house, built the systems in-house. We don't have the scale to do that. The business acknowledges that we're not a software company. We don't have the expertise to build out this kind of ecosystem. So we looked to, vendors in the market to put our technology into the next level, and that's how RT as a broadcaster is looking to kind of transform its systems.
Brad, on the scale point, when you look across Europe, the variations, are they driven by scale?
I wouldn't necessarily say so. If we're looking at the reach of a particular broadcaster, it's more about their willingness to be flexible in their ranging, in their testing of the different approaches and models, more than necessarily the reach or in terms of numbers or audience consumption.
Right, let's jump on then and talk a bit about how, in general today, broadcasters are running their digital services. So, Marta, I don't know if you want to kick us off on this one. If you had to describe a typical setup, what's the kind of mix of resources, the structure of the team, how integrated is it with the rest of the broadcasting business? What do you see?
Well, it all starts with having the content ready, of course, but presume that's there. You need to be aligned on all fronts. That's, I think, really, really important. So on the technical side, you need some people that do understand some of the technique, and the rest will be solved. But you need to have some technical people and to understand, like at least have project managers on board and have a commitment. And I think one of the things, and it was funny, the first time we started with RTE, Ronan showed a presentation, and he said we're going to be in a marriage, and that marriage will be in good times and in bad times. And I think that was definitely also the case here, and it's always the case, but as long as you see that you need a lot of people, and there's a struggle internally in broadcasters because you have the linear department and the OTT department that need to work together and also sometimes make bold moves. We have a customer that decided they have a real new premium show to already put it online while the last cliffhanger episode will be aired the 26th of May. You can already watch all episodes online, which is a fairly bold move to do because, well, it's a different way of approaching that. So I think internally you have to have a team of some project managers, people that understand the technique, but you can hire the rest. It's different than if you see the big companies like BBC or Netflix. They have hundreds of developers, and that's really hard. And I think Ronan really said it well. For our business, the front end business is we own about 250 different types of televisions to test applications on, and in order to get that investment and to see how it works on different devices, that's really a challenge, and to find all the differences, and that's what you can.
What you're really describing, it seems to me, is separate teams with separate workflows, separate areas of expertise.
Yeah.
The two businesses, as you say, are marriage, but very much running in parallel. But Brad, does that reflect your experience? Is that what you see?
We do, but I think the more successful broadcasters that we are working with recognize that ultimately the alignment between those teams has to be successful in order for those deliveries, those projects, those user journeys to be successful. We do still see a lot of the political challenges that large broadcasters face between the different teams, the old-fashioned broadcast team, the new IP people, and getting those aligned are critical for success. Ultimately, I think everything will be an IP department, but we've got a long integration road. The organizations that find a way to work together on those are the ones where we're seeing more success, not just in the products they're delivering, but also in how quickly they're able to iterate and evolve those products.
So, I mean, Ronan, you've been transforming RT for a while. Is it a happy marriage?
Yes. Well, there's still transformation to go. But I think, I think historically we had that where there was a broadcast team looking after the channels, there was a digital team looking after the digital stuff. They were in two different locations, they were creating the same stuff again, like it just didn't make sense. So as part of this, we have streamlined those services. We still call them the broadcast media management team, but they basically create the media once and it goes across everywhere. I think RT recognized resources, both financial and human resources. We don't have that capacity to have massive teams on their own looking after things. So operational efficiencies were one of the key drivers of this delivery, and I think using external suppliers where it made sense, where we didn't have the knowledge, to help us to move it on. But already the level of manual intervention in RT's output now digitally has massively decreased. So we've looked to automate everything. It's rights come in once, they go across linear, non-linear. It's a lot more streamlined, which I think enabled us to free up those resources to work on the content purely, because historically that same content team would have been troubleshooting platforms, which is a waste of talented resource.
And from a cultural point of view, are you trying to combine two things where they actually are quite different? Broadcasters are used to signing 20-year play-out contracts and doing things quite methodically and slowly over long periods of time often, whereas in the digital world you need to be moving agilely and quickly with a customer at the heart of what you're doing, and you're trying to combine very different cultures and mindsets in some respects.
Yeah, I think there's still, there are components within our architecture that are, still tied to those bigger broadcast kind of contracts. But RT recognize that there are elements which we have to move more agile, we have to move quicker, but we're still leveraging a lot of broadcast workflows because it just makes sense to.
I think one of the things that I think is interesting to see is that where you have linear, you just have to rely on external data on how your service is progressing or what's happening with if a title is successful. And I think now broadcasters see that with the traditional transmissions, they get much more data about how a show is perceived, when people will stop watching it. In the digital space, we do a lot on churn reduction, make sure that people stay in your application, which on normal television you do by doing teasers or making ad blocks somewhere not at the beginning of a show. But if you see what happens online, it's much more with the data that you can see, and that's where the data is sent to the linear people.
So let's turn from playing marriage therapist to playing teacher. How would you grade Europe's broadcasters in terms of their success in dealing with digital transformation? Scale of 1 to 10, Brad, where 1 is not great and 10 is very successful. Where are we today? What mark would you give?
I would say that we have identified. Sorry, I'll give you a number first, right? Because that's what you asked me. I would say 6 out of 10, John.
Okay.
We have generally identified the path that the broadcasters are moving down. We've talked a little bit about some of the challenges on those, but there's still a long way to go in the whole end-to-end ecosystem. Broadcasters' main focus has to be production of content and user engagement. The technology, everything else is not really what they should be focused on, right? Their strengths are there, and the industry is still, both the suppliers and the broadcasters themselves are still sort of figuring out where they sit, what the strengths and focuses need to be in those areas.
I think it's only really recently, it seems to me, in the last couple of years, we've started to see broadcasters moving from seeing their digital services as a support mechanism for broadcast, driven by catch-up, to a part of the business which can aggregate its own content, doesn't have to be driven by the broadcast linear schedule, can deal with different customers, can bring content on board that's never been anywhere close to a broadcast channel, Do you think we're going to see more of that as broadcasters move to change the way they operate these services?
Yeah, definitely. Yes, we see that happen more often. I think also their catalogs are growing because they see that they have to have rights for a longer period of time, and I see that the engagement on content is increasing a lot. So yeah.
Okay, let's jump back to you running quickly. So.
Yep.
Marks out of 10 for success. You know, when you look at RTE's efforts over the last
Scoring
few years,
ourselves.
this is marking your own homework.
Yeah.
Of course.
So,
How successful have you been, do you think, in doing what you've tried to do?
I think we're probably a C+. I'm not sure. We're moving up. I think there's still a lot of room to go, but I think we're on the service now. We have we've collaborations with Arte, we've collaborations with TG Caher, who's the S4C equivalent in Ireland. We have non-linear live channels which don't appear anywhere else on the RTE broadcast playout, and already we can see the numbers, based on the customer data underneath. The numbers on those are quite high. So people want that content. People want.
If you step back and take stock of the last 3 years, what's worked really well from a point of the transformation program you described? What's gone to plan, and what's been more challenging than you thought?
What's gone really well? I think we recognise where our strengths were. We recognise our strengths, on some of the broadcast infrastructure, our internal MAM, our transcode capabilities. But we also recognised, okay, we need to go out of house for these other components to move us up to the next level.
So good decisions about who to work with and in which parts of the business.
Well, I think, recognising that we needed to be vendor-led in certain areas. And I think that's the big learning. I think there's still learnings to go. It's early days. But
what's been much harder than you expected?
Much harder than expected. I think, obviously, we were replacing a product that's in the market for 8-9 years with quite a high user base. Stripping out everything underneath and doing pretty much a hot switch was quite the process. And there's still a little bit of pain there, but I think in the short to medium term, the benefits are there quite quickly.
So it was product issues really about managing that from a customer point of view.
Yeah, I think rollout complexities of, we basically, changed all of our backends completely to a full resilient failover system. It was, a big change.
So, Brad, is this a kind of typical experience of the ones you see when you're working with clients? But obviously the good news is working with great suppliers like yourself. The challenging thing is legacy.
Yeah, I think legacy is the problem.
I would say that the thing that RTE did best was the internal coalition and focus. There was a very strong sense of a team that was brought together from the different parts of RTE to form a focus on the key things that were important to RTE and to enable the partners that they brought in to get on with what they were asked to do. I think also RTE were very open to feedback from the suppliers and others that they talked to. They wanted to know what was going on, what was the experience out there in the market, and how could they feed that back in. So I was very impressed by the focus on the customer experience and on the internal alignment and collaboration from the top down. And I think that's why it was a successful engagement, is that the business drove the technology and the product, and it wasn't the other way around. Often it's the tail wags the dog.
So the thing we were saying is that it was holistic, that the business was looking at all of its touch points, not treating digital as a kind of silo, but thinking about it in the context of the bigger, wider operation.
Yeah, I making sure that within not just were represented, but felt that they were represented. That was important.
Okay. Martin,
So I think the things that RTE did really well is acknowledging really hard to do, and that is what you need. That you're continually busy with that. Like, okay, what can happen? What is because we've seen a lot that is a hard game to deliver service, and then you encounter a lot of challenges. And I think that is one of the things that RTD did really well. See, like, okay, we are working with some companies on doing this to be aligned and make sure that it's orchestrated well. So right. I think that it was one of that really helped driving success.
And can we jump on and quickly talk about parallelism, which is something that kept on coming up during the course of the research. So broadcast explained the pain they were grappling with was running a broadcast business in parallel to the digital business and trying to be best in class in both. And you felt that they were performing well in one, but not necessarily the other. And the cultures are very different, the skill sets are very different, the suppliers are very different. Was that something you felt you grappled with? How do we build workflows that bring these two things together?
Yeah, from out to team and kind of in all the different areas of the business. So, you know, technology team, digital team, historically content, TV and radio, all identity. I think we, as Brad said, we had a very strong team from across RT who were always looking at the workflows from end to end.
Right.
Probably
across both parts of the business.
Yeah, across the broadcast chain and the digital chain. I think probably historically it was very silo and isolated. This is how we get a digital piece of content in and out. Let's not, you know, involve the TV guys because what would they know? That's not the approach to take, I think, and that's, you know, across RT. There's, you know, one RT is our ethos now as part of the transformation, and that's very much played out in the new workflows. Yeah.
So, Brad, how are the broadcasters you work with dealing with bridging these two cultures? So,
I think that it's one of the key challenges that broadcasters have to deal with. I think it's even worse than you highlight here on the screen. You know, I've worked with or have conversations with broadcasters who have multiple digital platforms that are on different platforms.
Right.
So it's not even just a case of a workflow between left and right, but often there's an ad-funded system which is run by a different set of people and a different technology group which does its workflows separately from the paid-for subscription VOD product, which tries to run in parallel as much as it can with the broadcast channels. So I think those traditional challenges have to be streamlined for the businesses to be able to focus on what the key elements are for them. Some are doing it better than others, but there's still quite a tangled web out there for a whole number of broadcasters.
And I'm guessing, Martin, that's especially a problem for some of the big global international broadcasters, you know, who have lots of channels, broadcast to lots of different countries, multiple digital teams, obviously, complex mix between national and international. Is that something you've had experience of?
Yeah, definitely. Especially in Latin America, we see some really big ones that face this challenge on a daily basis. What we see there is they start to collaborate more. And one of the things we did was let's get them together because we need each other. And we tried to do like the game, instead of what can you do for me, it was more like what can I do for you? And then start to discuss where's your expertise. And we saw that on the linear there was a discrepancy that was actually fixed in that same meeting, that they saw like we need each other. And I think that is something that's they have to face that and to see that. As for having multiple contents and especially multiple languages, we saw also that's different because it's normally what you see, it's a siloed broadcasters and channels, but the OTT is getting to one or two persons that have to collaborate. And what we see is combining that and make sure that that's forming a team as well. That helps. So sometimes it's not even in our own business, but more helping them some psychology consultancy.
I mean, are we stuck with parallelism? Are we, for the foreseeable future, are we going to have broadcasters essentially running multiple products, but typically a broadcast team here and a digital team, and we're a long way away from switching off broadcast? You know, none of us, I guess, believe that linear is dying right today or tomorrow or probably 10 years
not
from
yet.
now. Are you basically stuck where you are, or do you have a roadmap that gets you closer together?
No, I think looking away from our player product, our news division has a digital first policy that everything they create should be out on digital first before it goes to linear broadcast. So I think that kind of mentality across the RT business is what's there now. So everyone is at the source creating content with those multiple endpoints in mind, whereas previously it was we're creating this for the news at 9 o'clock and nothing
And I think
else.
as well, you've made a
So
key
they're
point there
doing
for
all
me,
that.
that broadcasters are a very diverse bunch, that there's a world of difference between a big thematic national broadcaster like an RTE, or say a small niche broadcaster, or a generalist, or a big portfolio player operating across 20 geographies. It's a very diverse group. It's not clear there's a one-size-fits-all solution to this problem.
No, definitely. But I think before I had 25, I was busy in the publishing industry, newspapers, and everybody was saying newspaper will die within the next 5 years. Well, that was a long time ago. That didn't happen. But what you see is that the stories in the newspaper changed from actual news to more background stories. And I think that same transformation we'll see in this business, that people will think in a different way. As Ronan said, you make short clips that you immediately send out, and there's still a linear program during prime time, and that will stay, and you have to work together in order to make that work.
Okay, let's jump ahead. Here we go. So I think we should just pause and think a little bit about the next 5 years. So we've obviously had 2 decades of change. I think the first broadband services started appearing in Europe in the early 2000s. Ronan, what are you expecting in the next 5 years? What kind of changes are you trying to get ready for at RTE to deal with?
Well, I think you won't see a remote control like that. That's probably a safe bet. I think you'll see from the broadcaster side a lot more collaboration, a lot more alignment. I think this morning's news with BritBox, ITV and BBC going together, I think you'll see more of that in the different markets.
And why do you say that? Why do you think we're going to see more collaboration?
Because I think to be competitive with the likes of the Netflix and the Amazon, we need to pool our resources and pool our content. It's very well, RT has now a very good core playout platform. But collaborations like we have with Arte and TG Car and getting that content to one place is what the audience wants, what the audience expects. So I think the days of going to this place for one show and going to this place for another show by 2025, I think that won't be there anymore.
So your big change is more competition. Brad, the big thing we need to be getting ready for as broadcasters in the next 5 years?
I think it speaks to the same point, but content provision is key. Ronan talks about making sure that the product is attractive, that the experience is attractive to the audience that the broadcasters want to retain. They have to be focused on what is the content that their user's going to come looking for. So my crystal ball says that there's more collaboration, more investment, or more targeting maybe, if it's not necessarily additional investment, but more targeted investment on content of all types. Short form is proving more and more important, companion content, and I think we will see more of that surrounding the linear experience.
Okay, Martin, the next 5 years, what do we need to get ready for?
I think that I have young kids, and I will put them on math studies as soon as possible, because I think data will be extremely important. Getting your own relationship with your client, that you can identify him, address him, take his attention, and understand what your viewer needs. So on the data part, we'll see a lot of things happening. And for that, what we see is we can already collect a lot of data, but what to do with it and to understand that will be the next thing. That will take a few years, but that will change the way that we will interact with content.
Okay, so a final word from each of you. if the three big things the three of you are worrying about over the next 5 years are more competition, thinking more smartly about content, and then using data sensibly, if you were giving advice to broadcasters in the audience, and there's one thing you need to get right in 2019 to be ready for 2020, the one big thing to sort out this year is... don't say data. We've done data.
Yes. So I think most important is identify where your viewers of the future will be and be prepared for that. Because it goes slow, so what you do in 2019 will have effect in 2025.
Most important thing on your roadmap for 2019?
I think from the technology part of OTT, I think addressing what remains in legacy systems in our workflows, because I think to have the ability to adapt quickly and move fast, some of those legacy systems don't enable that.
Okay, and Brad, the one thing you're saying to your broadcast clients that they need to sort out this year?
Ensure that your strategy is clear and that it's executed well internally. Make everybody work together.
So nothing hard then. We probably have time for one quick question. We do. There's a microphone there. Does anyone have a question for our panel about how they're digitally transforming their businesses? We've answered everything. Well done. We've answered every question. In that case, all that remains to be... Oh, we've lost a slide. There was a slide there. Can I just go back one? No. We've lost a slide. The last slide, sadly, was going to tell you how to get the white paper. There is a URL, and I believe there are some copies of the white paper, which you can pick up over there. Over there. Over where? Over there. Go to the nice man waving now, and he will give you a copy of the white paper. There's also a download link. There's the download link. You can get it from there as well. It's full of interesting war stories from the front line. Quite a lot of Roland telling us about what RTE did, but all very interesting. So that just leaves me to say a massive thank you to our panel for hopefully sharing some of their war stories.
Thank you.
Thank you.